today. So welcome everyone who's here. This session should last about 30 minutes, but we may have a bit of extra time for chat at the end if people have got lots of questions. Please do keep your microphones off, certainly for the first part, just because of course it helps with the sound. But again, as I said, use the chat function and we will address questions at the end. It is being recorded, this session, and it will be available afterwards. And as with all of these, anyone who's registered, we will send out a copy of the slides afterwards as well. So you don't need to scribble everything down as we go along, as I said, and it will be on the portal for our Jigsaw schools. Just who's here today? I'm Sarah. I'm the programme lead for Jigsaw PSHE 3 to 11. And we're really lucky as well to be joined by Pardeep from Godolphin Junior School, Godolphin Junior Academy in Slough, who's also going to share some experience from her school, because Godolphin Junior Academy is one of our beacon Jigsaw schools. But she's going to sort of talk to you a little bit later. So again, I'm going to start. I'll let her introduce herself before she talks about her school, and I'm going to do a little bit more of the background and the theory stuff to start off with, because today we've got quite a few things we want to cover. We know there's a lot of questions about consultation and engagement, so we're going to look at what we mean by consultation and engagement and why it matters. We're also going to look at the statutory expectations and what good practice might look like. And then again, look at really those practical approaches and tools, what that really looks like in schools, which is why we're so grateful for Pardeep for being here as well today. So as I said, please do feel free to note down things in the chat as we go along, and we can come back to those later. What I thought would be really good to start off with, though, is what we mean about consultation and engagement. And you may well, this is sort of one of the series of webinars, and we've already had a webinar. There was a webinar, was it last week, week before, on developing your policy and the aspects of wider consultation that's really, really important in that across the whole of your school community. And today we're going to be focusing very much on that consultation engagement with parents and carers. But let's clarify, certainly from our point of view, what we mean by those things. So we've got consultation engagement very much as two sides of the same coin. So the consultation is what a lot of schools are really focusing on right now as we develop policies with, especially for schools in England, with the new PSHE guidance. So a lot of what we say today will be referring to that guidance, but will be relevant to schools across the whole of the UK and beyond. So consultation is really what we do typically when we're developing a new policy or new resources. So it's a sort of a time-bound event. This is what we're thinking of doing. What do you think? Please let us know your views, and then we can build that into that process. And seeking parental voice on curriculum content, on what's going on, is a really important part of that. Engagement is part of it, but we see engagement more as a sort of an ongoing thing that we do with parents throughout the year. So as part of your consultation, you might want to look back on previous engagement, and I'll come back to that theme as we go. It's continuous across the school year, and it's a really helpful for building relationships and shared understanding. So they are slightly different, but they very much go hand in hand. So both of those things, consultation, engagement, why do we want to do them? Why are they important? How can they help us to support children's learning and their health and well-being in PSHE? Because we don't do this for every curriculum area, but we all know that PSHE is different. Obviously, I'm a very big fan of PSHE, and I think PSHE is different and special, but actually there are other specific reasons beyond just that. So one of the reasons is that we all know we've got some sensitive topics. And again, I'm not going into all of those today. We've got lots of other webinars to support with what the content is, but we know that there are sensitive subjects in PSHE that are very personal and may vary very much according to children's experience. So through our consultation and our engagement, it prompts us to consider those different perspectives from the views of pupils in our wider consultation, but that for parents' views, and when I say parents, I mean parents and carers, so carers who are in that parental responsibility role, their views are really, really important for us to consider as well. We're also, through this process, modelling those respectful relationships and values that we want to deliver through our PSHE. So that's the statutory content and our wider PSHE as well. We also know that learning that children and young people's health and well-being is going to be much better supported if we've got consistent messaging between home and school. And so having those conversations helps us to ensure that what we are doing in school reflects what children need, and to help sure that they get help, that they're getting those consistent messages as well. And we all know that it can be worrying sometimes, because of what's in the press and these sort of wildly different views and scare stories and worries in press, that sometimes parents are really worried. So if we can be proactive before we are teaching some of these topics and explain what we are teaching and what we're not teaching, there's a lot of misinformation out there. We can reassure parents, which helps with all of those other three aspects on there, but also helps us in schools with confidence to deliver that content and to continue building those conversations and those relationships to support children and young people. And the last one is that certainly for schools in England, for RSE, it is statutory. But actually, that's just the relationships and the sex education, if you're teaching sex education in RSHE, but it's good practice. How can you possibly explain how we're teaching relationships or sex education and content without consulting on that wider aspect? So all of that, and there are possibly other reasons as well, but that's kind of some of the main ones. So the guidance makes this explicit. I don't want to talk too much about statutory, but I'm just going to quickly recap on some of that. There we've got from the July 2025 guidance, we've got our 7 principles of PSHE. And the 2 that are really most relevant here is the engagement and transparency with parents is there absolutely set out as statutory, and it ties into that whole school approach as well. So that ties into your other wider consultation and engagement you might be having, that you will be having going on with teachers and pupils and staff, governors as well. So there are some very clear statements making it very clear that we need to do this. So we need to engage with parents on the content of RSHE and be transparent about materials being used. So this is very much there as a proactive thing that you need to be doing. So just, I don't know, you might want to put in the chat, if you've got share some ideas. And what I'd love to do after this webinar is collect any ideas in the chat and send those out as well in a follow-up email. What are you doing in school that proactively keeps parents informed about PSHE? And if you don't put it in the chat, note it down now and put it, what do you know that you're already doing through the year? And what can make it easier? What do you think would help parents feel more confident about what their children are learning? Because it's not just engagement, it's that transparency as well. So there is the word proactive is really clear in the guidance. So you'll see there's a quote there about needing the policy published on your website. There are the non-negotiables. You must have a policy on your website. It must be available free of charge, and it must be kept up to date. The statutory requirement is that's for your relationships and your sex education. But if we want to be supportive, we want to work with parents and understand what we're doing, we would say much wider, your whole PSHE policy. But it says that you've got to be proactively engaging and consulting when you develop and review your policy. We've had a lot of questions from schools going, well, if we spoke to parents last year about the policy, do we need to do it again this year? Yes, this makes it very clear that when you are developing and reviewing your policy, which you need to do with this new guidance before September, you must proactively engage and consult. So we're looking at making sure that you are absolutely reaching out to make contact with those parents, not just publishing it quietly and mentioning it in a quiet corner somewhere that someone might want to look at it. We really want, as you read through that, you'll see that there's a real expectation that you're making the effort to link with all of those parents. But it can be worrying. We might be worried that by doing that, we're going to have lots of challenge, and it's going to make it difficult for you to decide what to teach, and there's some misinformation about what we mean by consultation. So there are boundaries. And again, this is really clear in the guidance that parents cannot just veto curriculum content. We're consulting to collect their views and so that they can see what their children are being taught. So consultation is a process where we're listening and we're considering those views. So when you collect those views in, when you've got those views, you keep a record. If somebody if you're worried about what you're going to be asked about it, and actually just for good practice going forwards as well, collect those together and show what you've done to consider those. And some of those views may be really valid, but actually you have to teach what's statutory, but maybe you might be able to make adaptations to your content. And that is often the case. You may move things around in respect of what's going to be the most positive outcome for children in your school. It allows you to explain what's going on in your curriculum. It's that aspect of making sure that you're telling parents and carers in advance, and we're building confidence and trust. But it's not an opportunity for parents to just say, you're not teaching that, I don't want my child in that lesson. It doesn't mean they can remove things that they disagree with just because a couple of parents say so. At the end of the day, you are the professionals, your expertise is valid, you have the flexibility to make choices, but within that statutory content. So you need to consider where and how your school has considered those parental views. I'm not going to talk a lot about sex education, but this is a question that comes up the most, so I'm just going to refer to it, and please do get in touch with me if you have any questions on it. But do make sure that when you are carrying out a consultation, when you are engaging with parents, that you absolutely understand what you mean by sex education. Look at what's in the guidance that's statutory health education. Look at what the DfE says about sex education. Again, our jigsaw documents have got some examples of what we think it is, and then only then can you be really clear in your consultation about telling parents where the sex education is. This is a non-statutory content, and therefore where they have the right to withdraw, and make it really clear that parents have the right to withdraw from children from RSHE or PSHE content, the sex education in RSHE and PSHE. They do not have a right to withdraw children from any science content, which is sex education. So it is really important that you're clear, because sometimes parents may go, I'm going to withdraw my child from sex education, PSHE, and not realize that actually you are teaching in the science curriculum. So obviously your PSHE policy, your PSHE consultation, you may not be talking about science, but we want to be transparent and open with parents. This is an example about how you really need to look about how that goes across the whole school. So yes, and again, being really clear about what that means is very important, and it can be confusing, but making sure that you're really clear about where we've got it in planned science and where it's in RSHE is important. So that's kind of all the statutory stuff. And again, we're really we might have some questions on that we can answer, but I want to look more about what we sort of talk about meaningful engagement. So there are lots of things that you can do that are meaningful engagement, which can feed into your consultation. So rather than just looking at your consultation now, think about what you're already doing, and also making sure that you build this engagement into your consultation. So letting parents know, actually, this is what we're going to continue doing. This isn't just one thing. We want to make sure that you can continue to have these conversations is really important. So sending home an overview of all the content every term. Don't just talk about sex education and puberty. Because that can send out messages, that misses out so much of our important curriculum. And we all know that PSHE is so much wider than that. You can have parent care events, make sure you've got display boards out, always talking and sharing, giving parents a chance to have those conversations with you in the school rather than it just being in policy. Policy can be a massive, very overwhelming piece of information for teachers as well as for parents. So it's about making PSHE conversations accessible as possible. Also explaining how pupil voices inform. What is it that children have told you when you've learned about a subject? What have they told you in lessons that's informing what you're doing, so they understand where you're coming from? And also then when you have that feedback, letting parents know what's there. And again, if you've got any ideas as you're listening, thinking, well, actually, we do this in our school, pop it in the chat. What do you already do to keep parents informed? Even those really, really small things, they can make a big difference, and listening, showing that you're listening to parents and you're feeding back. And it doesn't all need to be just through that policy. So there isn't one single way of doing it. I know some people go, right, how do I engage? Do I just do, I will look a little bit later about doing an introductory meeting, a whole school event, but it's not the only way to do it. There's no one right way to do it. It needs to be something that works for your school community. What matters is that it means something and it's going to make a difference. So which communication channels get the best response for your community? What have you already got what works? When you've done something in the past, reflect on this is what I mean about looking back at your engagement. What's worked in the past really well with PSHE or RSE, and how can you use that to inform your consultation and your next steps? Actually actively thinking about where you've got families who are harder to reach and how you can really support their engagement. And as I said, just what do you already do well that you can build on? And that's where you really need to start with this process so that you can make it meaningful when you look at your policy. I'm going to come back to what Jigsaw can offer to support with that and whole, as I said, whole school meeting. But I want to hand over to Pardeep now, who will explain a little bit about what goes on at Godolphin Junior Academy. And so, Pardeep, I'm going to ask you, can you unmute yourself, and I'll let you introduce yourself and tell me when you want to move on from one slide to another.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Yes, as Sarah mentioned, my name is Pardeep Kalarai. I'm a teacher, Year 6 teacher, and the PSHE lead at Godolphin Junior Academy in Slough. Just a little quick bit about us in case it resonates with any of you on the call, because I can see you're from all over. We are a beacon school. We were awarded the status last year. So when we're talking about parental engagement and the parents, I think it's very important to look at the demographic. So we are a very high EAL student. We have a high EAL student demographic. Most of our children have English as an additional language. In my class, I don't have a single white British child. We have about 2 in the whole entire year group. So maybe that's similar to some of you, or maybe that's a very different demographic compared to your school. We're not actually a faith school. We are just a mainstream school. However, again, when talking about parental engagement, we do have a very large sort of faith student body, and obviously which comes from the parents. So for example, when it's Eid, the Muslim celebration, I think a few years ago, only 6 children came into my class out of 30 because everyone else was celebrating. So when it is Eid, for example, we do go off timetable, so we have to take that into account. We have also Sikh children, Hindu children, so when they have their celebrations as well, they'll take time off school for that. The reason I'm mentioning this, because as Sarah was talking about being transparency, especially about sex education, we have to take these sort of views into account as well. And we are part of an academy as well. I think there's about 10 schools in our area who are part of an academy, which is very useful, because I don't know if anyone else is there as part of academy, but if we're looking at any topic, but if we look at parental engagement, it's always good to gauge what other schools are doing. So Sarah, if you could just go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So here's some of our approaches to parental engagement. I was looking at the chat, and it looks like a lot of you do many of these already. So the first one I could see in the chat, a lot of you are saying that you share your overview every term or half term. We do it on our app every half term. Like many schools, we have an up-to-date PSHE page on the school website, which is available whenever the parent wants to view it. However, I think PSHE is the only subject that we actually make the concerted effort to send out the message every half term about our pieces, our jigsaw pieces. I think the main reason was, again, just to be very transparent when it comes to jigsaw, and also we always put at the end, tack a line on about, if you have any questions, please feel free to speak to myself. And sometimes I'll hear nothing. In the past, I think we've only had a few parents come and speak, and they've actually come in to speak with the PSHE lead, who's a PSHE lead at the time. But now we don't get as much. However, obviously with the curriculum changing slightly next year, I think we'll have more parents coming in. Also, a few years ago, we did have, and I'm sure maybe a few of you had this, I think someone in the chat said they do this twice a year as well at another school, but we actually had our principal lead an after school meeting on the changes of the new PSHE curriculum. This was a few years back though, and staff supported with this. Now it was about, at the time, changes to sort of sex education, and the parents wanted to know, I think because the word sort of homosexuality was going to be introduced in some of the lessons. I think in a year 4 lesson, it was talking about a girl who had 2 fathers as part of her family makeup. So the reason why staff supported on this was because we knew there might be a sort of religious aspect to it, with parents not sure. So we had a teacher who was Egyptian, who was well versed in the Quran, the Muslim holy book, who came to speak on that side of it, and he was there. I was asked, because I'm a baptized Sikh myself, so I was asked there if any Sikh parents had any questions as well. It went really well, but as you said, like, the transparency was very important. I think a lot of them were worried there was going to be a lot of sex education, and when we realized that it wasn't quite what they thought it was going to be, because obviously we know in these religions they practice abstinence, so they felt much better about it, but they had time to ask questions there and then as well. And I think we probably will have to have a similar meeting with the new changes in 2026. Another thing we do, which I'm sure many of you do as well, is on social media. If you have an Instagram account where you share photos of lessons and the work, and obviously students actually doing the work and enjoying. I always try and get, the really positive ones where children look like they're really enjoying themselves, but obviously they always enjoy themselves in Jigsaw PSHE, but especially when they're doing role play as well. And I think also if you have like your Jigsaw gems, your plush toys, I think they always look really engaging in the photos as well. Another thing we do that sort of involves parents is when we have our PSHE competitions. So we've had a few when it's like anti-bullying week, where I think it was in one of the pieces, you have that sort of sock or the ribbons, and the children have to decorate them, but they're not, we do it in the lesson, but we make a competition of it where children take it home and put glitter on it or whatever they want. And then obviously we put that on the app, that children are taking part in this competition. And obviously, depending, some parents help more than others, but they're also aware of it, that, when the child's bringing work home, and that there's a prize as well. In addition, we have our PCOSO visits, so our police community support officers. When they come in, obviously what they do mirrors what we're doing in the curriculum. So they'll come in and talk about knife crime, water safety, fire safety as well. And parents are made aware that they're coming in and what the talk is going to be about. So that's another bow, another string we can add to our bow about including parents. Additionally, also, this is a really good tip. As I said, I don't know, I can see from the chat people are from all over the country. We're based in Slough, but I don't know if anyone else, a few of you should have a local, maybe it might be your sort of borough or your county, or maybe just your town if you're in a big enough town or city. We have things called PSHE or RSHE networks, where we'd meet up. I think it's every half term or every term. Now, I think last year we would meet up in person, but it depends on funding. So now we do it online. These are brilliant, especially if there's someone who's heading them, because I've got so much information on free workshops. So you have people come and sort of like advertise or market their free workshop, which is fantastic. I'm in year 6 at the moment, so after the SATs, we've booking in workshops on knife crime, domestic abuse. I think it's a charity called Kaleidoscope in London, and dental hygiene as well. And these are just fantastic in terms of networking with other teachers, asking for their parental engagement. But the fact that they give you these ideas for workshops and advertise them to you, and then it's quite easy to email them afterwards to book them in, I found that really useful. And then obviously we would inform parents as well, because something like knife crime, it's obviously would be a big deal to parents, and you have to have that transparency. Another thing, what happened in these workshops, just through the conversation and people giving tips, was one teacher said that whenever she wants to get parents in, especially if they're like around the year 5 age or year 6 age, or she would say if it was like a workshop on well-being, she would market it as an 11 plus workshop. So that was like a good marketing sort of tip or trick, where you call something an 11 plus or you link it. So I think most people, I don't know if you have 11 plus, sorry, I know it's we're like a national call, but in Slough we have grammar schools. So if anyone does have sort of a grammar school, or you can market it as a SAT something. So even if it's a workshop in year 4 on well-being, you can market it as like sort of SATs workshop, and then they come, and then it's also, talk about SATs, but also about well-being and emotional regulation and stress, reducing stress. So I thought that was a really clever tip from her, and I wouldn't have known it if I hadn't attended the PSHE network. The last thing that we do that I think is really engaging and interactive when it comes to parents is our workshops and trips. Now, a nice 2-for-1 is the piece, I think it's puzzle 2, is celebrating differences, the one we do in autumn 2. And what I like about that is that the workshops and the trips you do for that are also usually part of your RE curriculum as well. So yeah, you're definitely killing two birds with one stone there. So one of them that we do is a Holi festival. The Holi festival is a sort of Hindu festival where you throw colors at each other. Interestingly, yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. So that's a great one. We get a person in and we book him in for the day, and we do a lot of like Bollywood dancing, Bhangra dancing. In that photo, that's us. So we do throughout the day, we do the dancing, the practice, the choreography, and at the end of the day, at 3 o'clock, we invite parents to come and watch the performance. So again, fantastic way to engage them. And then some of them, we pull them from the audience and get them to dance as well. And they love it. And I think that's something, it's a lifelong memory that parents remember, children will remember as well. This one also, that, as I said, we are sort of a multi-faith school. So it has been a little bit controversial initially when we give out the letter to the parents saying, please sign permission for your child to take part and ask for the £7 donation that it cost. We will get a lot of parents saying, and children saying, we don't want to take part in this because it's not our religion. So that's when I feel like we have family workers. So we have a family worker and she will phone, and obviously I understand on a letter you can't explain everything. So the family worker will explain to them what exactly it is, how we're not actually asking them to take part in a sort of religious practice. It is just part of our British values as well, celebrating other cultures and celebrating differences. After the conversations that the family worker has, either through on the phone, or parents come in, or I speak to them, the majority, maybe just 1 or 2 in the whole year group, won't take part, but everyone else will take part. So that's been a great one. So if you can get those workshops in, as I said, it's a 2-for-1 because you can evidence it in your RE book as well as your jigsaw journal, and you get some nice photos for your website as well, especially for the Holy one, because then children have paint all over their face. So that looks great. And the next one, I think Sarah's on the next slide, which are just places of worship. Again, it is sort of RE. Of course, it's RE as well, but it is part of celebrating differences. The reason we have parental engagement on this one is because they're free to attend. So a lot of parents will come as parent visitors. With other ones, for example, if we're going to the pantomime, you can only have maybe 1 or 2 parent visitors because you have to pay for a ticket. However, I think when we had our Gurdwara trip, we had about 12 parent volunteers who came, which was a great number, and they learned a lot as well. And one of them she wouldn't stop talking about the trip and said, oh, I didn't know that this religion was the Sikh religion was so similar to my religion. I had no idea. So I felt like they learned a lot as well. And obviously it's a great bonding experience. And it was open because with the religious trips, as I said, we don't cap the number of parents who want to come for that one. It's sort of the more the merrier, and because we can facilitate them, mainly because they're free to get into. So that's been a great way to engage parents as well. And it comes under, as I said, Autumn 2, celebrating differences as well. And I think, oh yes, and another thing is on progress tracking. So I think with when it's parents' evening or end of year reports, your parental engagement would be telling the parent if their child is sort of working towards, working at, or working above. However, with PSHE on the Jigsaw website, you can get these. I think they come as sort of PDFs, but you can fill them in, and they're a progress tracking sheet, and they're for each puzzle. So maybe some of you use them, maybe some of you don't. We just get the teachers at the end of the half term just to write the list of the names of the working towards and working at and greater depth. So it's not too onerous of a task. And then we have Google Classroom, and we'll just share individually that child what they got for that puzzle piece. And obviously, because it's on Google Classroom, parents have access to it as well. So that's another way, because I think what happened was, I think we had sort of mock Ofsted come in, and they asked, how do your students know where they are sitting in, what is their assessment grade? How do they know? Do you share it? And we thought, we do this, but we never actually share it with the students. And I did see a question there. So we said, oh, yeah, we don't actually share it with them. And how would we share it? We felt Google Classroom was the best way to do it. So we do that 6 times a year after every puzzle piece where they are in that puzzle. And then at the end of the year, as you all do in your with your reports, you sort of make an overall judgment. But I think that's always been very interesting. Sometimes parents will type messages back on Google Classroom, or if they have anything else they want to say. And yeah, I think that's pretty much everything from me. So, as I said, I'm sure many of you do very similar things. But yeah, I think my main tips were definitely, as Sarah said, being transparent with parents. And it looks like you're all sharing, obviously, the overviews on the app. Definitely, if you can join any sort of local PSHE or RSHE networks with your local council, they are invaluable, especially because the other tip was the workshops, the amount of workshops they can offer you and the guidance of where to go and who to book it with. That is definitely a brilliant way to engage and interact with parents as well. Yeah, thank you for your time.
Oh, awesome. Thank you, Pardy. And there's a lot there, and we're going to run a little bit over, so I'm hoping people can stay. But if not, as I said, it will be recorded, and there are some questions. And as you said, it's great that you've picked up that lots of people are doing similar things to you. And I'm one thing I'm just going to reply to you straight away because it's on screen was about Samantha was asking if it's statutory to report on PSHE, which because obviously that's something that you're doing and it's good practice. And I looked this up after one of our webinars to double check. It's not statutory to report on PSHE or RSE at all. There's very little that's statutory to report on, but we think it was certainly raising the importance of it in reports, and most schools do have some sort of report on it, and this can help towards it, and we can have a look at that maybe later this year. But there's so much great stuff in there that hopefully has been really useful. Maybe we'll come back to some of that and questions on it at the end, and I'll just go through a couple more bits. I said, I'm sorry, there's always just so much good stuff to hear from schools. So what you really heard is actually what's great is before Pardeep sent her slides, I'd already had this in here ready, and it's like it totally reflects what is going on at Godolphin Junior Academy. Is that PSHE is bigger than RSE from those statutes, from this what's statutory to consult on. You've already got all of these areas: your emotional literacy, your health, your staying safe in there as well. But if we only tell parents about if they only hear about it when they hear about sex education or puberty, we can inadvertently send out a signal that that's what it's all about, and we know that's not the case. And actually, we're trying to combat that when that's what is often in press. Love the press, but it can be really, really unhelpful. Oh gosh, I really went for it there. So yeah, there we go. There we are. People were asking as well, I noticed, about information evenings as well. And that's a really good way to start, but it's not for everyone. I know I've spoken to some schools where they go, actually, we know that this isn't a helpful way forward. And we've got all of these other things in place that are great for communicating with parents. So, but a lot of schools find an information evening event really helpful. You can do it online or in person. What it does is it means that you're sending out a really clear, confident message. This is what we're doing. We would like to talk to you about it. We would like to invite you to be part of that conversation. And you can really use that to open it up. And you can have, if it's online, you can have chat questions that you can't answer live and respond to. You can build in questionnaires into that, whether that's on paper in person or online, or the opportunity for it. But you also then want to go beyond that. The issue is sometimes you have people who are not confident with that. So it's making sure it's that thing about being proactive. So yes, share your draft policy, but how else can you invite voices to be heard? And it's publicizing in all of those different ways. Even as Pardeep said, through those trips you're doing in RE, you can be publicizing what you're doing in PSHE and having conversations that way. Use your website to positively say, look at all these great things that go beyond PSHE, and to signpost to other things that you might have in your community as well. And making sure, I already mentioned it, you're capturing all of those conversations. But that, it's very easy for me to say that. There's still a lot of work involved in that. So just to let you know what we've got at Jigsaw already, which you may or may not have seen, is if you go to the parent and carer section, we've got 2 parent presentations there. One for schools that are choosing to include the recommended sex education in year 5 and year 6, and one for schools that aren't. But again, like all of the lesson plans, you can replace what's on the slides with your own content. You can change what's in the notes. And we've also got, which we think will be helpful, if you're not very confident, one of our consultants who's a really experienced PSHE expert has recorded what that session might look like. So it's quite useful listening to her tone. It's not for you to just share with parents because it wouldn't be relevant to your school, but it's quite helpful to see how that might look. And of course, we've got our parent access as well. But through this consultation process, you'll be saying, actually, you've got access to jigsaw materials, but this is how we've made changes. So that conversation is really important as well. And along with that, we've been updating all our parent leaflets and mapping overviews. So someone was asked about the presentation, but somebody was also asking about some of our supporting materials. So you can share, for example, the overview. We've also got, if you want to explain to parents what's statutory, what it is that you're expected to do, so they understand where you're coming from that side. We've got an explanation for parents about what needs to be taught. We've updated our Jigsaw PSHE leaflet, just explaining generally what PSHE is about, which is nice because again, it comes back from that focus on just the sort of scary subjects as well. We've also updated our leaflet. We've got a leaflet about supporting parents about how to talk to their children about puberty. We've also got a version which includes sex education as well for those schools which are choosing to teach about sex education. And the other thing that we've updated is a lot of people, I'm really pleased to say, are sharing half-termly the knowledge organisers. And I don't know how many of you have seen them. We haven't got them all, but they're going up now. But we've updated those. So what you will see is that with each puzzle, you've got that parent teacher knowledge organizer at the beginning of each puzzle for each teacher in a PDF version. We've expanded them. So the first page has got what's in the puzzle. There's more questions now. The second page is very much just for parents. So it's like, it's what questions could you have with your children at home to support that learning, to explore some of those themes as a family and talk about different ideas. And we've also got on them signposts for national websites and support and spaces so you can add local support or other things that you think are relevant. And there's a Word version of those in the general in the whole school materials section. So if you want to totally edit them for the changes that you've made, you can create your own edited versions of those, because we think they could be a really useful tool for that transparency and sharing what you've done. And just a little bit further on that. So what I really loved about what Pardeep was showing was it was all that ongoing engagement. Just seeing this come, they're all coming up. They are all in the get ready for 2026 area of the website. And when we send out a follow-up email in the next day or two, I'll make sure that link is on there. But just as an example, literally just last week, one of our consultants has been using our jigsaw materials to do the consultation. And they've developed their own policy. They've looked at what previously they've done with parents and what's worked, and they've realized that they haven't managed to reach everyone. So they realize that the policy is really long and actually not what all parents want to see. So they developed a nutshell version of their policy about what's actually going to be taught. They've done a parent information evening and they've done an online questionnaire. And they've had to keep following up. This is Hayley Allen from Heatherlands. Keep following up and asking parents to fill it in. But by really asking the questions, they've got a really good response. They've collected the results, and there's an example. And we will get this up on the portal in the next week. And they've agreed to share their questionnaire. Again, the questionnaire isn't right for all schools, and you do need to think about GDPR and how you're going to keep that information that's come in. But Hayley and the SLT at her school have agreed to share this with Jigsaw schools, and so we've got an example of all the questions they're asking. And what's great about this is they decided to use Google Forms. So the form looked a bit like that, and they had a scale: very confident, not confident, and open questions as well. And by doing it as a Google form, using the technology available, they've managed to sort of collect together. They've got 110 responses, which they're really pleased with. They know that's a difficult thing to do, but they've sort of able to see where parents are in response to a lot of those questions that they've asked. And things like, through the questionnaire, they're raising awareness. So one of the questions was, what do you find most helpful? So by doing that, they're listing, look at all the things that we are trying to do. Look at all the things that are available for you to find out. And so those are the examples, their nutshell summary, the conversation, school website. And out of that, they're able to find out that they've managed to sort of create a graph showing what the bar chart, sorry, get my terminal, maths is not my area, get a bar chart showing what people have found most useful. And they can then take that information and go, actually, well, this isn't very useful. Why? Does that mean we shouldn't be doing it, or are we doing it the wrong way? And that's a really helpful thing. And they can use that to inform their engagement as well. So what they're doing as well is they're really building on what works. Very much as Pardeep was saying, I know that Godolphin Academy have been working on this for a couple of years. So they're one of our beacon schools. So that's why their experience is really, really useful. And again, so this is just another school with the same thing about this good engagement is an ongoing thing to inform that consultation. And having that, we really want to make sure that we're preventing misunderstandings. That's not just misunderstanding from parents, it's our misunderstandings as schools as well that we can sometimes have about what it is that parents are thinking. And we do know that so many schools I speak to go, well, actually, when we spoke to the parents and when we showed them that what we're doing, they were really, really supportive. Of course, there's always going to be people who have different views, but on the whole, it's usually a very positive response. And and just focusing that it's really about PSHE widely and not just that RSE as well. It doesn't need to be an elaborate process, but just needs to be thought through and really about what's going to support our children and young people the most, which is I know is what you all want to do. We have run over quite a bit. I'm sorry about that. But if anybody, we'll have a look at some of those questions, Becky. I don't know what you've picked up from there for Pardeep or for me or for anyone, or other people might be able to
Yes,
reply.
we've got a couple, thank you, Sarah. How would you recommend parents respond to the draft policy? And how would we collect parental reviews? Would it be kind of like a survey?
I mean, I can say that Pardeep, have you got any experience of that? Have you got to that stage yet at the moment? Are you looking at your policy? What's worked in
Um,
your school?
yeah, no, because I think just everything I said before, because obviously we're going to start in September with the new RSCG changes. We haven't, I'm
Sorry, I
trying to
put
think.
you on the spot.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm just trying to think if we did like a parent view before in the past on PSHE. I think it was more just like obviously the transparent with the evening as well, and those who
Yeah.
wanted to come in. But yeah, I don't think I have a clear answer on how to get a sort of a full picture of what lots of parents are thinking.
I think it really does depend on your parents, doesn't it? On what works in your school. So I know that certainly that example I shared where from Heatherlands where they've done the parent the Google form, it's not the only way that they're listening. It's because it's not, some parents don't want to fill in forms, quite simple. Some won't see it. And there may be some groups who don't have access to the technology, or there may be language
Mm,
barriers. Those are all different aspects. So it's 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 there isn't one way of doing it. Forms are great, but I would always say that even if you're going to be doing an online form, or even if you're going to have something at a parents' meeting or goes out in bags, look at look at who you think are responding, because it might well be anonymous, and actually go, well, there are some groups where we would really like to reach out to them and find out what they think and ask directly. I'm really sorry, there's not
thank
one
you.
answer.
I think we've answered this question. Do you have a parent PowerPoint we can share with parents on the new changes? You've touched on that in that slide, didn't you?
Yeah,
Where
it's
they
in the parent carer area. So if you go to the getting started section in the materials and go to parents and carers, it's all there. There's a 2026 section.
We've had a couple come in as we were talking then. Is it better to get parental input into the policy before the new one is written or when it's in draft form?
I would recommend that you write your draft and then ask for parental feedback on it. But what I wouldn't recommend is that I mean, you could start from what, if you've got is going to be very similar to what you're doing. You could ask for feedback on that. But what's really important is that you are clear about what is statutory and what needs to be done and what language you may be using. As I said, for example, the sex education aspect and the puberty is so that if you have questions, you're really clear on what needs to be taught and what doesn't need to be taught, and what your professional expertise leads you to think is the right thing. I think having the draft in place is key, but it's probably not worth consulting after you've totally finished it, because that kind of shows you're not
Mm.
prepared to change it.
Yeah. We've had a really good one from a school that's part of a trust or a foundation. And they were saying that kind of the trust or academy creates the draft policy and they don't really have that much involvement. So how does that sit in the with the parental engagement?
It's really interesting. We've been talking to quite a few schools and quite a few trusts, and in the past, trusts have. I think in the past, trusts that have been doing that have been unwilling to allow changes. But I think a lot of trusts, certainly the ones we're speaking to, are starting to understand that that's probably not going to wash, because some of these trusts are very large and the schools are very different. And what's right for one school in that trust may not be right for another. So what a lot of trusts are doing is they are providing a trust-wide framework, and then within that there are parts that you can change in your school. So if
Mm.
that is the case, and if you think that's not going to be, I'm very happy to speak to anyone in trust about that and how that might work, if that's any help for you. But I think there is a bit of a change in most areas, of a bit of change in understanding and trust that they can't dictate exactly what every school is going to do, because it is a statutory requirement that every school carries out this type of consultation. And yeah, it's not going to work totally trust wide.
Brilliant, thank you. I think that is all of the questions answered.